What up, what up, what up? Welcome to another episode of New Orleans Basketball. I'm your host, Rafael Rello, joined by my fellow middle brother, Garrett G. Money. What's poppin' with you, bro?
What up, bro? Things all good on this side, man. The city got hit with a monsoon yesterday, so a lot of people shaking back from that, man. So hopefully everybody's all right, dealing with that. But yeah, man, playoffs are here. Pelicans are not a part of it, at least on the court. But there are other things. Of course, the Pelicans always are in the news for something. Something is happening with the Pelicans at all times. But playoffs are here. Man, got some good games. Had some upsets already, man. Some of the home teams are lost. They always say the playoffs don't start to the home teams. Like, well, they lost on getting game one. So, there's that. And I think, the crazy part about the playoffs right now is that in the East is like, okay, if the 8 seed beat the 1 seed in the East, like if the Heat beat the Cavaliers, it will be a ginormous, incredible upset. I think if the 7 seed Orlando Magic beat the Celtics, crazy upset. But in the West, it's like, yeah, the Rockets are the 2 seed, but like Steph and Jimmy are playing. Like Steph and Jimmy are there for Golden State, so like that's not that crazy of an upset. Obviously, Ant is the 6 seed. Ant and the Wolves are the 6 seed. The Lakers are the 3 seed, and they already won a game there. So it's like, it just shows you how stacked the Western Conference is, as far as competitive teams versus the Eastern Conference. So it should be a really good time. I think, the Saturday and Sunday that just passed with Easter and all of that, that was like the best 48 hours of the season when you get those 4 playoff games back to back, and then Sunday you get the 4 games back to back. So yeah, man, it's a great weekend. And also, man, before we move on, everybody knows I'm a cinephile. If you haven't seen it, I have seen it twice. I endorse Sinners. It's one of the best movies ever made. It is incredible. So if you haven't got the chance to go out and see it, please go out and see it on whatever format. I saw it in IMAX, and I saw it at the Britannia Theater in the 70 millimeter, oldest theater in the city and a lot in the country. So if you haven't seen it already, please go ahead and see it. But yeah, man, it was a good holiday weekend for me. And obviously led right into, the new president of basketball operations taking over for the Pelicans. So looking forward to getting into that, bro. How's everything on your side?
Everything is blessed. I mean, you're right. This weekend was full of holidays, no matter which ones you celebrated, whether it was NBA playoffs, Easter, or whatever it may be. You're right, man. Like, they've had some good games. They've also had some not so good games.
Yeah.
Like they're about to be down 0-2.
Hey, bro, losing by wait, so let me ask you a question. How long do you have to be employed as the coach of a team before losing by 50 in the playoffs gets you unemployed by that team? That is atrocious. Atrocious.
That was hard to watch. There was a couple other games that were hard to watch. Some of the play-in games were hard to watch. I tweeted out the play-in just didn't feel right without the Pelicans in it. They've been in it every year up until this point, and it just felt like something was missing this year. But yeah, man, this weekend was full of a playoff interaction, full of implications. I'm really watching these series to see, like, every year the NBA is a copycat league and you're adjusting to the small ball, you're adjusting to double centers or double bigs again. I'm looking to see what tendencies are going to leak in the next season and what's everyone going to go into the offseason talking about. We need to mirror that. Last year was the Celtics shot a ton of threes. Everybody came out this year shooting a ton of threes. That's what I'm looking for. What wins in these series? Because you're right. There's so much parity in the league, especially in the Western Conference, that, I mean, outside of OKC miraculously not closing out this series versus Memphis, any series could really go anyway. Like the Clippers Nuggets series is ridiculous.
Incredible.
From that regard. And again, like, those are two teams that the Pelicans have matched up well in the past. And so I'm just interested to see, again, what are some of the themes that you take into the offseason? So you mentioned it. Yesterday was the first day Joe Dumars officially took over as the vice president of basketball operations for the New Orleans Pelicans. Today was his introductory press conference. I wanted to be there, but I had travel restrictions that made me cancel my flight at the last moment. We will be at the next one with NOB. Before we get into that, make sure you guys follow us on X, on Twitter, on TikTok, on Instagram, YouTube, whatever it may be, and follow us to check us out. Let me know your thoughts. Let's just jump into it. Pelicans make this announcement again. Rumblings and people we've talked to have known that this was going to be the name and the person for quite some time, and quite a little bit has been talked about before David Griffin was even fired or mention of him being fired. So this has been in the works for some time. You can kind of tell some of that have been in the works. The first person you saw from the Pelicans staff or existing staff was Willie Green at the introductory press conference of Joe Dumars. If that doesn't tell you that he's probably going to be around for some time, or at least this next year, maybe the fact that Joe Dumars himself came out and said, I've known Willie Green for a long time, that's someone that I'm going to make my first firing as the new president of basketball operations. What were your thoughts? What were some of the initial takeaways after Miss Gail and Joel introduced Joe Dumars and some of the things that he had to say?
Yeah, I think, again, this is something, again, we talked about some of the people that we talked to and some of the people we had mentioned. And, it was to know that this was kind of already in the works for a while. It's an interesting move. But I think when you talk about, this press conference, I think the first thing that, that stuck out to me was the fact that obviously Willie Green was there. There's so much talk about, should Willie Green, have been let go, or should he, is he the right coach for this team? Again, to me, I don't think that question has been answered fully. I think, he has shown you some ways for you to lean a certain way if you feel a certain way. Obviously, Willie Green, I guess the head coach of any team that has Zion on it is polarizing because if it's not working, you got to go. Obviously we see it with Alvin Gentry, we see it with Stan Van Gundy. Obviously the prevailing thought for Willie Green, for his ride has been that he needs to go. But I think, you see, Joe Dumars kind of coming in and showing that the Pelicans are, for better or for worse, leaning into this, familiarity and knowing, who's there and knowing the people around them, and keeping that kind of in circle. And again, for better or for worse. So I think with Willie Green being there, and being, at the introductory press conference and Joe Dumars mentioning, him and his relationship with him. Again, I think they're showing you their hand as far as that goes. I think the other thing that was super, obviously that jumped off the page to everybody was his comments on Zion, right? And the mandate that was reported to be, that he needed to trade Zion for a cause. Again, in fairness, we've seen people say things and then it goes another different direction. Mm-hmm. I don't think that he was given a mandate. But I do think that Joe Dumars is also not afraid, obviously, to make moves, to do things. And so, again, I don't think that Zion, is on the trade block or anybody, is looking to trade Zion. But I also have seen, you say something now and you envision a certain path that a team goes or that a season goes. And then it doesn't go that way. And so just saying that right now, I don't think it really, shuts the door on anything if anything was to go bad during the season. But I do think it was important for him to come out and also mention that he's talked to Zion while he was in New York working in that job, and then also as the front man for the Pelicans, right? He's called him and talked to him about that. And he's also talked to all the players. So it seems as though he's trying to hit the ground running. I think the word that he uses that is go time, and I think that's a little bit better than won't bow down. But I think it'll be interesting to see what he brings to the team, because again, I will reiterate this until the cows come home. If he doesn't have the magic touch for injuries, or coming in and throwing in some new ideas about how to keep people on the floor, we've seen that this is a results-driven league, and it doesn't matter the processes that you put into place. If the results don't show, then you gotta go. And so I just want to see, as he hits the ground running, what are his new ideas and plans as far as keeping this team healthy and keeping this team competitive.
Right. Couple things to that. I think you're absolutely right when it comes to Zion. I think it's important that they have a relationship. And I think part of this, the reason why Joe Dumars was attractive to the Pelicans front office and the Pelicans ownership is because of who he was as a player, because he was the guy who played all 82 games, and bringing that in, someone who's lived that life, been a superstar, won a championship, can only serve as a good role model for your aspiring superstar who is trying to get to that. I think part of that is that. Another thing, it seemed like the ownership was very cognizant and very directive when they were looking for someone who understood the Southeast region or Louisiana altogether, because he leaned a lot on culture. He leaned a lot on his experience with this area and growing up in this area and things like that. Let me ask you this question. Do you have a problem with the process up until this point? Do you think, hey, there's a lot of familiarity here, which can be good and can be not so good in situations, but it seems like Miss Gale, one of the first things she said was, I had a lot of interactions with Joe through NBA meetings and things like that. And so obviously we know the Mickey Loomis and Joe Dumars relationship there. Do you have a problem with the fact that this feels super familiar?
Yeah, I do. And I think, the whole process is something that, I'm not too comfortable with, strictly from the fact that, listen, we've seen, how familiarity, has its pros and it has its cons. And I think the circle that is, that Ms. Gale has behind her, or the circle that she, puts herself in and trusts herself with, has had some mixed results, and lately hasn't been hasn't had the most shining and glorious review. I do think that not giving the process the due time of interviewing other people, hearing other people's perspectives, hearing other people's thoughts about how they could come in and do the job, even if they aren't your cup of tea. I think that you are doing the job a bit of a disservice by not interviewing people, by not bringing multiple people in, by just strictly saying, okay, there's a job opening, I know exactly who to go to, a guy who I've been knowing for years and years and years. Even if that was your guy, like even if Joe Dumars is your guy, which is fine. Like if that's, again, it's not my team. I don't own the team. I'm not a billionaire. So it's your team. You run it how you see fit. Even if that's your guy, I think, the prudent thing to do is to allow the process its time. Nobody was banging down the door for Joe Dumars to come run in and save their franchise. You could have hired Joe Dumars at any point in time. But the fact that it seems as though, and again, we've talked to people who was like, yeah, this has been in the line for a while. To do that while like David Griffin was still employed, and to have that already kind of like in the bag already, I'm not a fan of the process. And I'm really worried about when you have too many people that are inside of a circle, and you have a lot of people who, get in front of each other's face and go, exactly, yes, exactly. It tends to not only not get the best out of the situation, but I'm afraid that it also makes things linger for longer, right? Like you have relationships with people, so it's harder to let them go if they're not doing their job right. It's harder to, to see, the imperfections or the things that are going wrong. And so those are the kind of things that I worry about. But again, I don't want to get, cast aspersions on Joe Dumars before he even steps foot in the job. He has a task in front of him, and by all accounts, he has the basketball mind. He's been in the office with the NBA, so he's been away from teams, but he's been in the NBA realm. I just worry about that inner circle stuff, and the yes men aspect of it, and if it's going to linger too long, if it does not work out. I just, those are the kind of things that I worry about with this process, the way it took place.
Here's where I'm at with it. I think it can be an asset. It absolutely can be an asset if you're from the area, you understand the fan base, you understand the region, you know what these teams mean to the people in Louisiana, Mississippi, you name it, Alabama, you name it. But there's also an aspect to like just finding the best candidate, right? Like it just doesn't matter where you're from. Mm-hmm. In fact, the more different you are, probably the different perspectives you have that might be able to be mixed into this. And, you know, Joe Dumars today really reiterated a lot of things. Like, we're trying to find the right people. We're trying to do the right things, hire the right personality, draft the right players that are built of the right stuff. That he talked about drafting people and the person versus drafting the player, and figuring out how do you get to know both of those things. And I do think there is a benefit to him having been in the league office, and he referenced this as well. He said, I've seen how all the other teams operate. I know what good franchises look like. I know what bad ones operate and what they look like as well. And that's experience that may lend to his value or may lead to his scoop. But on the other side of that as well, it's like, okay, well, there's other people who've seen different things as well and have had exposure to both good and bad as well. And sometimes it's good not having all like-minded people. Now, when it comes to building a culture, and again, that's the word that gets thrown around. Everybody wants to build the OKC culture, the Heat culture. Everyone wants to have their own culture and have high standards and things like that. A lot of that comes with how do you enforce those standards and how do you live by those every single day. A lot of the times of what Joe Dumars was talking about in his introductory press conference this morning, it sounded like when Willie Green steps up to the mic, when he talks about treating people the right way and doing it the right way. And so I think that having people with the same end goal and knowing this is how we want to treat people and how we want to run our organization is a good thing. But I also think you need to have outliers and people who are going to say things that are off the cuff to make sure that people are thinking about other directions and things like that. How that comes to play, again, Joe Dumars is not a quiet guy. Again, if you know him from his bad boy Pistons day, toughness was what he was built on. And so I think that is good. And I think some tough love has desperately been needed to some Zion and other stars that have come through this door as well. But the mix of those things is important. Now, something that popped out to me that I want to get your take on. He mentioned several times, not once, not twice, mentioned several times, I didn't go looking for this role. It happened to be the right role that was for me because I'm from there. And again, this is something I aspired to do, bring a championship to New Orleans. But he kept saying, I wasn't looking for this role. This role that came to me. What are your thoughts on that? Is sometimes the best leaders are the ones who don't ask for it. But other times you're like, there's a lot of people that want to be GMs. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, see that, but again, that lends to what we were just talking about, you know, this job being potentially open and the powers that be saying, I know exactly who to go get without even doing any process or anything. It's like, hey, we turn it right to you. Do you want this job? And part of that is me being, again, afraid that it's like, okay, he didn't want this job, but a job opened up and it just so happened to be home. So he's like, yeah, why not? To hell with it. Let's go for it. YOLO. You only live once. Let's just go be the VP. So those are the kind of things that I worry about. I don't really like, you know, the person in charge of making, you know, basketball moves. If he indeed is going to be the guy making those choices, saying that, like, I really didn't want this job, but like it found me. So on one end, I get what he means. Like, hey, I didn't go ask, you know, Gail to become this person, get this position. You know, I didn't step on David Griffin's toes. I get what he means by that. He doesn't necessarily mean I didn't want the job. But at the same time, like, you want somebody coming in and saying, listen, I've been looking this team up when I heard that this was available. You know, I ran through all of the different things that I could do. I brought that to Ms. Gail. I sold them on my vision. This is what my vision is, as opposed to I wasn't looking for this job. I just it just comes off, especially with the franchise in the position that it needs to be, because again, this is a super important hire and a super important time for the Pelicans when you think about where Zion is, where Trey is, where the brunt of this roster is, where they've been and where they're trying to go. You have to get the person who's going to connect, Zion with the floor, basically, and then the roster construction. You want that person to be, all the way in on it. And again, there are guys, and I see John talking about it in the comments. There are analytical guys. There are a bunch of like basketball nerds and sickos and anything you can find across the landscape that are itching to get into these positions, that have new thoughts and innovative ways to look at the court and look at the game, and place people in positions to be successful. And so to hear him say that just gave me a kind of let's not say that anymore. We get it. We get what you're trying to say.
I'll push back a little bit, right? Because we've seen both in the NFL and the NBA, especially in the last decade or so, guys that come in with their clipboard saying like, this is the analytics and this is what we tell them it, and we're going to change our entire way of playing basketball to fit the analytics. And to Joe Dumars' credit today, he was asked that question, like, do you plan to lean more into the analytics? And he said, hey, my office was right next to them and things like that. I think there's a healthy balance of both. I think that you both need to look at what the data is telling you, but also be a basketball player and be able to read the game and things that are more intuitive, more so than just what the data is. I think you need to have both things, because when you approach it with just the data, you miss parts of the game that are nuances of the game that don't show up in a data point, right? And things like that. And so I think there is a combination of both those things, which leads to a question, right? How much power, or how much delegation, I should ask, is Joe Dumars actually going to do? If you look at his decision-making influence, it's been going the opposite direction. Obviously, in the Pistons, he had all the power, and they had a roller coaster, extreme highs, and then some really tough lows. Then for a while in 2022, he's with the Kings. He's with them for like a year before Vlade Divac walks away, and he really doesn't have any power there where he's making decisions over roster, personnel, trades, things along those lines. And he's been in the league office for the last 5 years, right? So since then, so he's been going further and further away from being on the phone and doing the Rob Pelinka deals and things like that. So the last couple of years have actually generated, for what you and I have broadcasted on this podcast, a lot of positive results from a roster building standpoint, from a drafting standpoint, and from a free agency fine standpoint, things like that. If you look at the Pelicans' history, they've really only had like 6 main decision makers in the entirety of the franchise. So obviously you're coming off David Griffin. You had Danny Ferry, for a year. Dell Demps had a long run where he was making all the decisions and he was the GM, right, so to speak. David Griffin was not. He was the president of basketball operations and things like that. Before him, you had Jeff Bauer, Alan Bristow, and Bob Bass. That's not a whole lot of people who have called shots for an entire franchise for quite some time. Again, we talk about familiarity and the organization, for good or for bad, wanting to lean on the people they know and the people they brought up and groomed. Well, Bryson Graham, again, a name that has been attached to Herb Jones, a name that's been attached to some of the players that the Pelicans have, quote unquote, found over the year, just got put into a GM role last year. Do you think it's going to be some type of thing where let's keep letting you do what you do well, and let's bring my expertise and my connections around the league to supplement that and to add to that? Or do you think it's more likely he's going to come in here and kind of shake everything up?
I think Joe Dumars is the type of guy, again, if he wasn't looking to be, looking for this role, it found him. I think Joe Dumars is the kind of personality who is gonna want to be hands-on when it comes to the things that are happening on the floor, right? And I don't mean like coaching or anything like that, but guys playing, the availability of guys, like he's gonna be the guy to be giving that tough love and pushing guys and getting the best out of guys as far as getting them ready to get on the floor, preseason or whatever, before the season starts and things. If it were me, I would want Bryson Graham to be making, some of the if not majority of the basketball decisions, only because he has a proven track record with this team, with the guys that are on the team as well, right? You talk about Herb Jones, you talk about Trey Murphy, right? You talk about guys like Dyson, right? Who aren't here, but obviously Bryson and Trajan saw that and was like, hey, that's a guy that could do some things for the Pelicans. Obviously that didn't work out with the timing, but he has gone on to do things. He's a defensive player of the year finalist. Najee Marshall, Jose Alvarado, like these are guys that both Trajan and Bryson both had hands on finding and drafting and selling the front office on these guys, right? And again, you talk about wanting, or Joe Dumars talks about, wanting good people and having people finding good people. Well, Bryson Graham has done exactly that, right? Like Herb Jones, by all accounts, is a great person. Trey Murphy is a good, by all accounts, is a great person. Jose Alvarado, is a great person. Even, some of the guys that are Dyson and those guys, like those guys were good people. And so again, the things that he says that he wants, Bryson has shown an affinity to not only find that, but also find talented players, right? This team, again, underachieved in all of those things. But you cannot say that the guys on the team are not good, right? Like Herb Jones is a good basketball player. Trey Murphy is a good basketball player. Jose is a good basketball player. Like these are good, basketball players, as well as when you talk about good guys. So Bryson has shown that, and he has a connection with the guys on the team. I think Joe Dumars is obviously going to work with that. He's already started. He talked about calling the players. He's going to do that. But Bryson has shown both the ability to find the guys that you like, but also find good talent. And I think while Joe Dumars is finding his footing, because again, to me, I don't give a rat's ass where he's from. I don't care that he's from New Orleans. This is just me personally. If you're good, you're good. I could care less where you're from. But while he's finding his bearings, with the team and with the franchise and with the city and going into these meetings and finding people to draft, you want to have a guy like Bryson Graham kind of being the mediator and being the training wheels for Joe Dumars as he gets his bearings. So I can see Bryson Graham kind of stepping up and him, having that kind of role where he gets empowered by Joe Dumars. Because again, he doesn't seem like a tyrant, like he's trying to come in and just kick everything in to the start. He knows what he needs to do. Talking about Joe Dumars, and he knows what that thing that he brings to the front office and to the team. And I think he's going to execute that. But I would like to see him keep Bryson Graham close by his side and let him make some of these basketball decisions because he's shown a proven track record of doing so.
I think one of the most resounding things of the press conference today, he was asked, what have you learned since obviously things did not end well in Detroit where he's beloved, and then since being in a different role, what have you learned since then that you can apply today? And I think he gave a great answer, and it kind of alludes to your point of being able to recognize this is what I do well. He mentioned, like, I don't know anything about anything. I don't know why there were injuries. I don't know why this is going wrong, but I'm going to find out. I'm going to go talk to people that can paint the picture for me versus coming in with an agenda, assuming something. His response to, like, what have you learned the most? Say that you have to be adaptable and you have to be able to be malleable as this league changes and grows and you only get older and it only gets younger. How are you looking at maybe the things you don't do so well and finding people like Bryson Graham or finding people like Swing Cash or whoever it may be to supplement you in those areas, right? And to be better in those areas. And again, that all comes with good leaders, right? Good leaders know self-awareness. He brought it up. Your favorite attribute, he brought it up in his speech. Self-awareness is very important. Knowing what you bring and what you can bring and what is lacking and knowing how do you fill in those spots. And that's the job that he has for him. So we have one more question for you today. Do you feel like the hire fits the situation? And like the reason why I asked that question is like, again, we talked about it. Joe Dumars from the Bad Boys Pistons Day was known as being, Mr. Tough Guy. He was that was the culture. He talked about it. They wanted to exemplate the the culture of Detroit with how they played the day in and day night. And he wants New Orleans to also do that same thing. And that's what he's looking to bring. Is it so simple as like they were looking for someone to kind of bring tough love? Like, this is a team that Willie Green himself last season called soft multiple times. There's been a lot of reports in terms of how Zion's been treated. He's been babied multiple times. Willie Green, for as good of a person as he is, has been called soft sometimes as a coach. Could this be as simple as, hey, we needed a guy to kind of push the right buttons and push him in the right way?
I mean, they definitely needed that.
Because I don't think Griff was connecting with the team, with anyone like that.
Yeah, no, I think what this team, and again, Willie Green you alluded to it about Willie Green calling the team soft, and then people having this conception of Willie Green being soft. I think part of it comes from the fact that you hear he doesn't curse. He very rarely gets texts. Like, he very rarely is like yelling at anybody. There's a reason why the slogan in the play-in conference went, "You got to freaking fight, not something else." There's a reason why that happened, and I think again this goes to what we talked about like-minded people. And I think this part of Joe Dumars is the thing that is going to be needed sorely in the Pelicans. They need somebody to come in and say, yeah, that's not going to work. We're not going to do that. Like, no, that's not going to happen. You're not going to do that. This is what the plan is, right? You talk about Zion being being able to, not be with the team at all during the summers, during the early parts of his career, being allowed to like miss practices and, finally getting suspended for a game because of missing flights and things like that. Joe Dumars is not going to accept that. He just is not, right? That is just something that he is wired to be tough. He is wired to be, hard-nosed. I want to see if that's going to translate to his relationship with the players, because it's one thing to do it while you're on the floor. You know what I'm saying? It's one thing to do it when you're part of a team. It's another thing to do it when you're sitting in a suit and you're an executive, and you demand that kind of, of toughness from your players. But they sorely needed it. And I think, as far as that aspect goes, it definitely, fits what the Pelicans need right now. The Pelicans are in a situation where they have to start showing results on the floor, but immediately before these conversations that we already saw, right? Like, nobody brought anything up about Zion being but this is what happens when you underachieve year after year after year, right? You went the Pistons went from you can't keep Cade and blow this team up and what was this hire to being in having a tied up series against the New York Knicks in the playoffs in one year. Well, that's what winning does. The same exact way losing is the reciprocal of it. When you're losing, it can go from, man, Zion and David Griffin have found things out and they've hit the ground and a new leaf, and Zion plays 70 games and you go from there to the front office is a mandate to trade him away. It just, that's what losing does. And so I think when you talk about the aspect of having a guy come in and just not accept, what the less than maximum effort, whether it be in trainings, whether it be in meetings, whether it be catching flights, whether it be practices, whatever the case is, to have a guy that's going to draw that line in the sand and stand on his laurels. I think that is exactly what the Pelicans need at this point in time, because if they can't respond to a champion, a guy who has been to the mountaintop, who knows what championship ball looks like, who did it as a player and then built a championship team. If they can't, be receptive to that, then at what point, what kind of person will they be receptive to at that point in this iteration of the team? So I think that they definitely needed this. It is going to be very interesting to see the dichotomy between Joe Dumars and Willie Green, because again, Willie Green is not going to change who he is for anybody. I don't think Willie Green is a soft person. I just think that he is a God-fearing person, and that type of person lends themselves to a certain type of behavior, right? Behavior on the floor, I think that type of thing. And so, it's going to be interesting to see how that kind of goes if things are not going the right way, how those two will interact, especially with their past relationships and things. But as far as hiring a person who needs to come in and bring in some of that toughness and tough love, I think that's exactly what the Pelicans needed. I would have loved, again, to see the process be different, but that is the type of person that you want to have in the building to kind of go against the flow of what's been going on for years in the front office.
Before we get out of here, I'll leave you one thing. What is the thing that every team, every franchise, including OKC, every franchise is striving toward? Alignment with the front office, the coaching staff, and the star player. Again, Willie Green, and that was the first thing Joe Dumars said today, that he's known Willie Green for a long time. And again, if you close your eyes and kind of just listen to the press conference, you would think that Willie Green was talking. Maybe Willie Green Sr. was talking, because a lot of the thing he was saying is a lot of things that Willie Green has preached since he's walked into the Pelicans facility. So there seems to be alignment there, and it makes a whole lot of sense that he's remaining the coach as Joe Dumars is brought in. To your point, now is the time, the go button for this franchise for so many reasons, especially when it comes to the star player. To your point, all this can resonate with Jose and Herb and Trey. If this doesn't resonate with Zion, I think this is your last domino, right? At this point, Zion has mentioned several times before, he's an old head, right? Like, in a lot of ways, he looks at things from old school perspective. You ask him who's his favorite players, he says like Magic and Larry Bird and things like that. Mm-hmm. So he's very astute when it comes to the history of the game. If a NBA champion, if a Hall of Fame executive is coming to your front door and say, I played 82 games for this amount of years, this amount for one franchise, this is how it's done. If you can't accept that and you can't embrace that and become a leader based off that, I'm not sure if there's another David Griffin, Joe Dumars, I'm not sure that that's ever going to align from that standpoint. And so, again, we talked about this before when it came to, CJ McCollum being traded here and what he does on the court, meaning just as much as what he does off the court. I think what Joe Dumars is able to do to build around Zion means just as much as, can you get it to click for him this summer and go forward from there? We shall see. The draft lottery is just a few weeks away. The playoffs are holding you down until then. That's when Pelicans will begin ramping up again, because, again, the Pelicans will not be playing any playoff games the rest of this summer. With that being said, what you got left for the people, Gag?
As always, you never know what people are going through, so give someone a smile today. The playoffs are going, and the Pelicans will be doing things behind the scene. And so, as we move through this process, and get ready for the draft lottery, we'll be bringing, obviously, once the draft lottery is announced, and the position that the Pelicans pick, we'll be bringing to you, our prospects. It'll be a short list again this year because,
hopefully,
let me not say knock on wood. I do live in New Orleans. Hopefully it will be a short list of prospects. Hopefully it might be just one prospect. That'd be great. But yeah, hopefully, it'll be a short list of prospects. So we'll be bringing that to you guys. So as always, follow myself at Garrick_Rattler. Follow my brother at Raphael_Rattler. Follow the page at NO_basketball no E. That's on Twitter, Instagram, wherever you get your socials. Most importantly, subscribe to New Orleans.basketball. We'll see you guys next time. Hey,